3 in the morning. Keanu Reeves could not sleep. He wandered into his kitchen and found a teenage girl scrubbing dishes in the dark. Her hands were raw, her eyes were hollow. She was terrified. She was the valedictorian of her class, a presidential scholar. She had a full scholarship to Stanford, and she had given it all up. Thrown the acceptance letter in the trash, quit school, started working 2 jobs, all for $1,200 a month, all to save someone she loved. But the real shock, Keanu knew her grandfather, and he owed that man a debt that had been waiting decades to be paid. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that made a man hear his own heart beat. Keanu Reeves stood by the window of his modest home in the hills outside Los Angeles, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Sleep, once again, had abandoned him. It was not a mansion. It was not the kind of house people expected a famous actor to live in. It was a comfortable home, warm and simple, with wooden floors that creaked in familiar places and bookshelves that held more memories than decorations. Keanu had never cared much for luxury. He had learned long ago that big houses only made loneliness louder. Tonight was harder than most nights. Tomorrow would mark another year since his brother Daniel had been gone. Sleep never came easily around this time. His brother's face kept drifting through his thoughts, young and smiling, frozen in a memory that would never grow old. He pulled his simple gray robe tighter and decided to walk. Movement sometimes helped. The house was dark, lit only by the pale glow of a nightlight in the hallway. His bare feet were silent on the cool wooden floor as he made his way down the stairs. That was when he heard it. A small sound, almost nothing. The soft clink of glass against granite. The quiet rhythm of water running in a sink. Keanu stopped and listened. The sound was coming from the kitchen at the back of the house. His security system was good, but not excessive. He lived simply, without guards or gates that made him feel like a prisoner. Still, no one should be in his kitchen at this hour. He moved quietly down the hallway, his curiosity sharper than any fear. The night before, he had hosted a small gathering. 15 people from the film crew he had just finished working with. It was not a fancy party, just pizza and wine and good conversation with people who had become friends over months of long days on set. The dishes had been left for Rosalind, his housekeeper, to handle in the morning. Rosalind Calloway had worked for him for 8 years. She was reliable, quiet, and one of the few people he trusted completely with his home. But Rosalind was not supposed to be here now. Keanu pushed open the kitchen door slowly. The room was dim, lit only by the small light above the stove, and there, standing at the sink, was a girl. She was young, perhaps 17, with blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Strands of it were stuck to her damp forehead. She was hunched over the sink, scrubbing a wine glass with desperate energy, as if her life depended on getting it clean. Keanu cleared his throat softly. The girl gasped. She spun around so fast that the glass slipped from her soapy fingers. For one terrible moment, it seemed like it would shatter on the floor. But she caught it, just barely, her knuckles turning white as she gripped it against her chest. Her eyes were wide, not just startled, terrified. And in that terror, Keanu saw something else. It was the look of someone who had already decided how this would end. She expected him to be angry. She expected him to fire her mother on the spot. To her, wealthy people and compassion did not belong in the same sentence. Keanu held up his hands gently. He kept his voice soft. "It is okay. I did not mean to scare you." The girl stared at him, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She seemed frozen, unable to move or speak. "I am Keanu," he said. "Who are you?" She swallowed hard. Her voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "I am Ember, Mr. Reeves. Ember Calloway. I am Rosalind's daughter." Rosalind's daughter. Keanu's mind clicked into place. He had met Ember a few times over the years, usually on weekends when she came to help her mother with larger cleaning jobs. She had been younger then, quieter, always polite. He remembered her carrying buckets of cleaning supplies with a serious expression, like a soldier reporting for duty. "Ember," he said, stepping fully into the kitchen. He reached for the light switch and turned on the main light. The room flooded with a soft white glow. In the brightness, he saw her clearly. She looked exhausted. The skin under her eyes was dark, bruised with a kind of fatigue that came from months of running on empty. Her hands, still clutching the wine glass, were red and raw. She was thin, thinner than a girl her age should be. "What are you doing here?" he asked gently. "Where is your mother?" Ember's response came too quickly, too rehearsed. "She is sick, Mr. Reeves. Just a bad cold. She felt terrible about the dishes from your party. I told her I would take care of it so she could rest. I have a key. I help her sometimes. I just wanted to get it done before she woke up." Keanu listened carefully. He had spent decades in an industry built on performance, on reading people, on understanding what was said and what was hidden beneath the words. He knew a lie when he heard one. This was a protective lie, the kind a child tells when trying to shield someone they love. His eyes drifted to the sink behind her. It was piled high with dishes. Plates, pans, platters, dozens of wine glasses. A lot of work for one exhausted teenage girl in the middle of the night. "A bad cold," Keanu repeated softly. "And she sent you here to do her work?" "No." Ember's voice was suddenly sharp, almost fierce. The fear was still there, but now it was joined by protectiveness. "She did not send me. She does not know I am here. I came on my own. Please do not be angry with her. It is not her fault." Keanu studied her face. There was desperation in her eyes, and beneath it, a fierce, stubborn love that made his chest ache. "You should be in bed," he said quietly. "You have school tomorrow." Ember flinched. A small movement, almost invisible. A tightening of her shoulders, a quick drop of her eyes. Keanu saw it clearly. A flinch meant a hidden truth. A flinch meant pain. "Yes, Mr. Reeves," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the floor. "I will be done soon. I promise I will not disturb you again." She turned back to the sink as if he had been dismissed. It was a clear signal. "Please leave. Please do not ask any more questions." Keanu did not leave. He stood there watching her scrub. He saw her small hands, raw and red, moving mechanically through the soapy water. He saw the tension in her thin shoulders. His eyes wandered around the kitchen and landed on a backpack slumped against the wall near the service door. It was old and faded blue. The zippers strained with the weight of whatever was inside. But it was not the backpack that caught his attention. Dangling from the main zipper was a blue and gold honor cord, the kind that valedictorians wore at graduation. It was bright against the faded fabric, almost defiant in its cheerfulness. Next to the cord, tucked into the side mesh pocket, was a small framed photograph. It was old, the colors faded with time. A young woman and a man in a crisp army uniform. The insignia was familiar. 101st Airborne Division. Keanu felt something shift in his chest. A strange feeling, like a puzzle piece clicking into place. But the puzzle itself was still incomplete. A valedictorian, working in the middle of the night, washing dishes, lying to protect her mother, flinching at the mention of school. These pieces did not fit. "Leave the dishes," he said. Ember stopped. Her hands froze in the soapy water. She did not turn around. "Mr. Reeves, leave them. Go home. Get some sleep." "But my mom," her voice cracked slightly. "She will be so upset if they are not done. She will think she failed. She will think she is going to lose her job." In that moment, Keanu understood something about this girl. She had learned to expect the worst from people with money. She had grown up watching workers be dismissed for small mistakes. She believed that kindness from the wealthy always came with conditions, or did not come at all. "I will handle your mother," Keanu said gently but firmly. "Go home, Ember. Rest." She hesitated. For a long moment, she stood there, her back still turned, her shoulders rising and falling with uneven breaths. Then, slowly, her shoulders slumped. It was not relief. It was defeat, as if she had failed some important mission. "Yes, Mr. Reeves," she whispered. "Thank you." She pulled off the heavy, wet apron and hung it carefully on its hook. She dried her raw hands on a dish towel, wincing slightly as the rough fabric touched her chapped skin. She walked to the door, picked up her old blue backpack, and slung it over one thin shoulder. At the door, she paused. She turned back to look at him, her eyes searching his face for something. Judgment, perhaps, or anger, but Keanu only looked back at her with quiet concern. "I am sorry for disturbing you," she said softly. "It will not happen again." And then she was gone, slipping out into the darkness, leaving nothing behind but the echo of her footsteps and a sink full of questions. Keanu stood alone in the kitchen. The silence rushed back in, but now it was different. It was filled with questions, with pieces that did not fit. He did not return to bed. He went to his study, a small room with comfortable chairs and shelves lined with books and old photographs. He sat down in his favorite chair, the leather worn soft from years of use. Outside the window, the black sky was beginning to lighten. He sat there, watching the darkness turn to dawn, his mind turning over everything he had seen. The exhausted girl, the honor cord, the soldier's photograph, the fear in her eyes that expected cruelty instead of kindness. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong, and Keanu Reeves was determined to find out what it was. Keanu did not sleep that night. He sat in his study until the first light of morning crept through the window, turning the sky from black to gray to pale gold. His mind kept returning to the same images. The exhausted girl at the sink, the honor cord on her backpack, the soldier's photograph, the fear in her eyes. At 7 in the morning, he picked up his phone and called Marcus Chen. Marcus had been his personal assistant for 12 years. He was precise, efficient, and discreet, one of the few people Keanu trusted completely. "Marcus," Keanu said when the call connected, "I need your help with something." "Of course. What do you need?" "Our housekeeper, Rosalind Calloway." "What is her current situation?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. Keanu could hear the faint sound of typing. "Mrs. Calloway?" Marcus replied carefully. "She has been inconsistent lately. Many sick days in the past 3 months. I was actually preparing to discuss ending her contract. Her work has been irregular, and I assumed she was no longer reliable." Keanu felt a tightness in his chest. "Hold that file, Marcus. Do not do anything yet." "Of course. Is there something I should know?" "Her daughter," Keanu said. "A girl named Ember. She is about 17 years old, a senior in high school. I need to know everything about her. The school, her grades, her attendance. Everything." There was another pause. This was not a typical request. "The girl was here last night," Keanu explained, "at 3 in the morning. She was washing the dishes from the party. She looked broken, Marcus, completely exhausted, and she was carrying a valedictorian's honor cord on her backpack." "I understand," Marcus said. "I will look into it immediately. One more thing. Her backpack had a photograph. A soldier in an army uniform. 101st Airborne Division, I think. Find out who he is." Keanu spent the morning in a fog. He had a phone call with his agent about an upcoming project. He reviewed a script that had been sitting on his desk for weeks. But his mind was elsewhere. He kept seeing Ember's face, the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands trembled as she scrubbed the dishes. At 4 in the afternoon, Marcus appeared at the door of his study. He held a thin manila folder in his hands. His face, usually calm and unreadable, looked troubled. "Mr. Reeves," he said quietly, "you were right about the girl." He walked to the desk and opened the folder. Inside was a printout from a school website. A photograph showed a young girl with bright eyes and a wide smile, holding a certificate. She looked healthy, happy, full of hope. It was hard to believe it was the same girl Keanu had seen in his kitchen. "Ember Calloway," Marcus began. 17 years old. Senior at Ridgemont High School. He slid the paper across the desk. "She is not just a good student. She is the county valedictorian. Perfect 4.0 GPA. She received a full academic scholarship to Stanford University, one of the most competitive schools in the country. And 3 weeks ago, she was named a United States Presidential Scholar, one of only 160 students in the entire nation to receive that honor. Keanu stared at the photograph. The girl in the picture was radiant. Her future spread out before her like a golden road. The girl he had seen last night was a shadow, worn down to almost nothing. A presidential scholar, Keanu said slowly. Washing dishes in my kitchen at 3 in the morning. That is the problem, Marcus said. His voice was grim. He slid a second paper across the desk. It was an official attendance report from the school district. I spoke with the principal at Ridgemont High this morning. A woman named Mrs. Pemberton. She was very emotional. She said she has been trying to reach Ember for weeks. Keanu looked at the report. The numbers told a devastating story. As of 30 days ago, Marcus continued, Ember Calloway stopped attending school. She has been marked for truancy. The school sent letters but received no response. And when they tried calling, the phone was disconnected. He paused, his expression growing darker. But Mrs. Pemberton told me something else. Before the phone was cut off completely, her calls were being blocked. Someone had deliberately blocked the school's number. Mrs. Pemberton believes Ember did it herself. She did not want her mother to find out she had stopped going to school. The weight of that revelation settled over Keanu, like a heavy blanket. A 17-year-old girl, blocking calls from her own school, hiding the destruction of her future from her sick mother. The desperation behind that choice was almost unbearable to imagine. 30 days, Keanu whispered. Yes, she has missed the deadline to accept the Stanford scholarship. Mrs. Pemberton told me the admissions office tried to reach her multiple times, but there was no reply. The scholarship is gone. Her graduation is in jeopardy. If she does not return to school and complete her exams, she will not graduate at all. The waste of it. The sheer, tragic waste. It felt like a physical blow to Keanu's chest. This was not just a girl skipping school. This was a brilliant young mind being snuffed out, a future being destroyed one day at a time. Why? Keanu asked. His voice was low, heavy with something between anger and sorrow. Why would she do this? Why would she throw everything away? Marcus's expression grew even more somber. He pulled out another document. Rosalind Calloway. It is not a bad cold. Keanu looked up sharply. She was diagnosed 3 months ago with a severe, aggressive form of lupus. The disease attacks her joints, her organs, her immune system. The standard treatments are not working. She needs specialized medication, but her insurance will not cover it. They classify it as experimental. He paused. His voice dropped. The out-of-pocket cost for the medication is $1,200 per month. $1,200. To Keanu, it was nothing. A rounding error. The cost of a nice dinner. To Rosalind and Ember, it was an impossible mountain. There is more, Marcus continued. Rosalind was working a second job at a dry cleaning shop to help cover expenses. She was fired 2 months ago for missing too many days due to her illness. The job here, working for you, is all they have left. It provides a small income and, more importantly, health insurance that covers her basic doctor visits. The pieces were falling into place now, each one more painful than the last. Their phone was disconnected to save money, he explained. And Ember has been covering her mother's shifts here, unpaid, just to keep you from noticing that Rosalind is too sick to work. She has been cleaning your house, doing her mother's job, for free, all to protect her mother's position. Keanu stood up from his chair. He walked to the window and stared out at the afternoon sun. His hands were clenched at his sides. She is not just covering her mother's shifts, he said quietly. She has also been working somewhere else. She must be, to earn money for the medication. I am still looking into that, Marcus replied. But it seems likely. The girl is running herself into the ground trying to hold everything together. Keanu turned back to face Marcus. His eyes were hard, but not with anger. With determination. The soldier in the photograph, he said. What did you find? Marcus pulled out the last piece of paper from the folder. It was a grainy black and white military photograph. A young man in uniform, strong and proud, with kind eyes that seemed to look directly through the camera. Sergeant Walter Calloway, he answered. Ember's grandfather. Rosalind's father. He served 2 tours with the 101st Airborne Division, Baker Company. He was highly decorated. He passed away in 2012. Keanu's blood ran cold. Baker Company. He walked slowly across the room to a bookshelf in the corner. On one shelf, among the books and small mementos, was a framed photograph he had not truly looked at in years. He picked it up carefully, as if it might break in his hands. It was an old photograph, faded with time. A group of young men in military fatigues, smiling in a dusty foreign landscape. They were so young, barely more than boys, their arms thrown around each other's shoulders with the easy camaraderie of men who had faced death together. My brother, Keanu said. His voice was barely above a whisper. My older brother, Daniel. He was in Baker Company. He served in the same unit. Marcus was silent. He understood what this meant. Daniel did not come home, Keanu continued. His throat was tight. He was 22 years old. It destroyed my mother. It broke our entire family. He looked at the photograph in his hands, at the young faces frozen in time. Somewhere in that group, or in another photograph, just like it, was Sergeant Walter Calloway, a man who had served alongside his brother, a man whose granddaughter was now washing dishes in his kitchen at 3 in the morning, sacrificing her entire future to save her mother. Keanu set the photograph down carefully. When he turned back to Marcus, his eyes were clear and sharp. This is not an employee, Marcus, he said. This is family. The word hung in the air between them. Family, a connection that spanned decades, linking 2 families through sacrifice and service and loss. Get me their address, Keanu said. His voice was low but steady, filled with a quiet intensity. And find out where Ember Calloway is right now. The address Marcus had given him led to a gray, worn-down apartment complex in a part of the city Keanu rarely visited. It was the kind of neighborhood where dreams went to struggle, where families worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. He drove himself in his old pickup truck, not one of the nicer cars he owned. He wanted to be invisible. The building was tired, paint peeled from the walls in long strips. The hallway smelled of old carpet and cooking oil. Keanu walked up 3 flights of stairs, the concrete cracked beneath his feet. Each step felt heavier than the last. He found apartment 3B and knocked softly. For a moment, there was only silence. Then he heard it. A slow, painful shuffling from inside. The sound of someone who found every step a struggle. The door opened just a crack, held by a thin chain. A single eye peered out, filled with fear. Messes. Calloway? Keanu said gently. It is Keanu. Keanu Reeves. The eye widened. The door slammed shut. He heard a muffled sob from inside, then the rattling of the chain being removed. When the door opened again, the woman who stood before him was barely recognizable. Rosalind Calloway had aged 20 years in 3 months. Her face was gray with pain. Her hands, once capable and strong, were swollen and twisted. She leaned heavily on a metal walker, her thin arms shaking with the effort of standing. This was not the neat, capable woman who had cleaned his home for 8 years. This was a woman being consumed by her own body. Mr. Reeves, she gasped. Her voice was thick with shame. I was going to call. I just needed a few more days. I can still work. I promise I can still work. Rosalind, Keanu said softly, stopping her. I did not come about work. I came to see you. He stepped into the tiny apartment. It was spotless, every surface clean despite the poverty that surrounded it. But it was cold. A single small electric heater glowed weakly in the corner, barely enough to warm a closet. The windows were covered with plastic sheets to keep out the draft. This was a home held together by pride and desperation. I saw Ember last night, Keanu said. Rosalind's face crumpled. She sank onto the worn sofa, her swollen hands covering her face. "Oh God," she breathed. "She promised me. She promised she would stay home. I told her I could still do the work. I told her I just needed rest. Rosalind, why did you not tell me you were sick?" She looked up at him, her cheeks wet with grief. Her eyes held a kind of desperate pride that broke his heart. "And say what?" she murmured. "That I cannot do my job. That you should fire me. This job is all we have, Mr. Reeves. The insurance pays for my basic doctor visits. Without it, we have nothing. I thought if I could just hold on a little longer, everything would be fine." She gripped her walker with unsteady hands. "Please," she begged, "please do not fire me. I will work for free if I have to. Just please do not take the insurance away. And please do not punish my daughter. Everything she has done, she did for me." Keanu lowered himself into the single worn armchair across from her. He was no longer the famous actor. He was just a man, sitting in a cold room, trying to understand the weight of impossible choices. "The scholarship," he said quietly. "Stanford. The Presidential Scholar Award." Rosalind made a sound that was not quite human. It was a wail of pure, unfiltered despair, rising from the bottom of her soul. "I found the letter," she sobbed. "The one from the White House. I found it in the trash can. In the trash. My daughter threw away the greatest honor of her life like it was garbage." Her swollen fingers shook as she wiped her eyes. "I asked her about it, and she looked at me with those tired, empty eyes, and she said, 'What is a scholarship, Mom? Does it pay for your medicine? Does it keep the lights on?'" Rosalind's voice broke completely. "She is throwing away her entire future, her whole beautiful life. For me. For $1,200 a month. I would rather die than let her do this." Keanu felt something crack inside his chest. This was a kind of poverty he had almost forgotten existed. Not just the poverty of empty wallets, but the poverty of impossible choices. "Where is she now, Rosalind?" he asked. "Where is Ember right now?" Rosalind looked away as if confessing a crime. "She got a job," she said quietly. "A real one. The night shift at a diner downtown. The Blue Moon Diner. She works from 6 in the evening until 2 in the morning. Then she comes here to check on me. Then she goes to your house to clean before dawn. She sleeps maybe 2 or 3 hours a day. She is killing herself, Mr. Reeves, and I cannot stop her." Keanu stood up. His jaw was set, his eyes clear with purpose. "Stay here," he said. "Lock your door. I will be back." The Blue Moon Diner was loud, bright, and smelled of stale coffee and grease. It was the kind of place where truckers stopped at midnight and lonely people nursed cups of coffee until closing time. Keanu walked in wearing a simple dark jacket and jeans. No one recognized him. He was just another customer looking for a late meal. He took a booth in the corner, his back to the wall, and waited. A waitress came over, an older woman with kind eyes and tired feet. "What will it be?" "Honey?" "Just coffee," Keanu said. "Black." He scanned the room as she walked away. And then he saw her. Ember was moving through the tables like a ghost. She wore a uniform that was a size too big, the name Patty stitched in faded red letters on the pocket. Her blonde hair was hidden under a blue hairnet. Her face was pale, her movements mechanical. She did not smile. She did not make eye contact with anyone. She simply worked, refilling water glasses, clearing plates, taking orders with a voice that sounded like it came from very far away. She looked like she had been doing this for a lifetime. She looked like she had forgotten she was only 17. Keanu watched her for 20 minutes. He watched her wince when she lifted a heavy tray of dishes. He watched the manager, a short man with a stained white shirt and angry eyes, bark orders at her from behind the counter. "The man's name tag," said Gary. "Gary Thornton." Ember just nodded at each command, her face blank, and kept moving. Then Keanu saw something that made his blood run cold. A customer at a nearby table left a handful of bills on the table after paying. Ember collected the plates and reached for the tip, but before she could take it, Gary appeared beside her. "I will take that," he said, snatching the money from the table. You have not earned tips yet. Maybe when you stop breaking things. Ember's hand froze in midair. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Hurt. Anger. But then it was gone, replaced by that terrible blankness. "Yes, sir," she said softly. Gary stuffed the money in his own pocket and walked away, leaving Ember standing alone with an empty tray. Keanu's hands tightened around his coffee cup. He had seen enough. Ember was clearing the booth next to him now. Her arms were overloaded with plates, her thin body straining under the weight. "Ember," he said quietly. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the diner's noise like a knife. She froze. The clatter of dishes in her hands stopped. She turned slowly, her eyes searching for the source of the voice. When she found him sitting in the corner booth, her face went from pale to white. The blood drained from her cheeks. She looked at him. She looked at her greasy uniform, at the name patty on her chest that was not her own. She looked at the half-eaten food on the plates she was holding. And in that moment of complete humiliation, her hands began to shake. The tray slipped from her unsteady fingers. It hit the floor with a deafening crash. Plates shattered. Glasses exploded. Ketchup and leftover food splattered across the dirty linoleum. The entire diner went silent. Every head turned to look at the girl standing in a pool of broken dishes. Ember did not move. She just stood there, staring at the mess, staring at Keanu, her thin shoulders beginning to tremble. "Miller!" Gary's voice cut through the silence like a whip. He came storming out from behind the counter, his face red with fury. "What do you think you are doing? That is coming out of your pay. Every single plate, every glass." He stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to step back. "Look at this mess," he spat. "Useless. Absolutely useless. This is what I get for hiring people like you. Poor people who cannot even hold a tray without dropping it." A few customers snickered. One man at the counter shook his head in disgust. No one said anything. No one stood up. Ember dropped to her knees. She began picking up the broken shards of glass with her bare hands, her fingers shaking so badly she could barely grip anything. "Get a broom," Gary shouted. "Get that cleaned up right now. You are lucky I do not fire you on the spot. That is a week's pay in breakage, you worthless little." "That is enough." Keanu's voice was not loud. It was low, calm, and heavy with an authority that stopped Gary mid-sentence. The entire diner seemed to hold its breath. Keanu stood up from his booth. He walked over and positioned himself directly between the manager and the girl on the floor. He was taller than Gary by several inches, and though his demeanor was quiet, there was something in his eyes that made the smaller man take a step back. "Who the hell are you?" Gary blustered, but his voice had lost its edge. He was looking at Keanu's face now, really looking, and something was starting to click. "She is a child," Keanu said, his voice cold and even. "And she is clearly exhausted. The way you treat your workers says everything about who you are as a person." Gary's face went through a rapid transformation. Confusion. Recognition. Then something that looked almost like fear. "What?" he stammered. You are Keanu Reeves, the actor." His entire demeanor changed in an instant. The anger melted away, replaced by an oily, desperate friendliness. "Mr. Reeves, I am so sorry. I had no idea you were here. This is such an honor. Can I get you anything? A meal on the house? I am such a big fan of your work." Keanu did not smile. He did not acknowledge the flattery. He simply looked at Gary with eyes that held no warmth at all. "A moment ago, you were screaming at this girl, calling her worthless, stealing her tips, and now you want to give me a free meal." Gary's smile faltered. "The way you treat people when you think no one important is watching." Keanu said quietly, "That is who you really are." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet. He removed $400 bills and placed them on the counter. "That is for the broken dishes, and for my coffee, and for every tip you have stolen from her." Gary stared at the money, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. Keanu turned his back on the manager, dismissing him completely. He crouched down slowly, his knees protesting slightly. He was now at eye level with Ember. She was still on the floor, surrounded by broken glass, silent drops rolling down her face. She was still trying to pick up the shards, her hands unsteady, barely able to grip anything. "Ember," Keanu said gently. "Stop. Look at me." She raised her eyes to his. They were filled with shame, with exhaustion, with a despair so deep it seemed bottomless. "Get up," he said softly. "You are leaving?" "I cannot," she breathed. The words were choked. "My shift. I need the money. My mom needs the medicine. I am so close. Just one more week and I will have enough for this month." "Your shift is over," Keanu said. He held out his hand. It was a clean, steady hand, a hand that had helped hundreds of people over the years. "Come with me." She stared at his hand for a long moment. In her eyes, he could see the war being fought. Pride against desperation. Fear against hope. She had been taught her whole life that people with money did not help people like her. But she was so tired. So utterly, completely tired. Slowly, she placed her small hand in his. Keanu pulled her gently to her feet. He did not let go. He kept her hand in his and turned her toward the door, shielding her from the stares of the other customers. "Wet," Gary called out. He seemed to realize he was losing an employee. "She cannot just leave. She has to finish her shift. She owes me for the broken." Keanu paused at the door. He looked back at Gary, and something in that look made the manager stop talking immediately. "She owes you nothing," Keanu said quietly. "And she is never coming back here again." He pushed open the glass door and guided Ember out into the cold night air, leaving the broken dishes and the smell of grease behind them. The car was warm. It was Keanu's old pickup truck, nothing fancy, with worn leather seats and a heater that hummed softly. Ember sat rigid in the passenger seat, her hands clasped in her lap, still stained with grease and blood from the broken glass. She stared straight ahead, unable to look at him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the quiet rumble of the engine and the soft rhythm of rain beginning to fall on the windshield. "Your hands," Keanu said finally. "Let me see them." Ember flinched. She looked down at her palms. There were small cuts across her fingers, thin lines of blood welling up where the glass had sliced her skin. "It is nothing," she murmured. Keanu reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a small first aid kit. He opened it and took out antiseptic wipes and bandages. "Give me your hand," he said gently. She hesitated, then slowly held out her hand. He took it carefully, his grip warm and steady. He cleaned each cut with gentle precision, his focus complete. When he applied the antiseptic, she winced slightly, but did not pull away. "I am sorry," she said, her voice barely audible. "I am so sorry you had to see that. I never wanted anyone to know. Especially not you." "Why especially not me?" "Because," her voice cracked, "because you are my mom's employer. Because I thought if you found out she was sick, you would fire her. Because I thought rich people did not care about people like us." Keanu continued bandaging her hand. His voice was quiet when he spoke. "And what do you think now?" A single tear rolled down her cheek. "I do not know what to think anymore. I am so tired, Mr. Reeves. I am so tired I cannot even think straight." He finished with the bandage and looked at her. Really looked at her. She was just a child. A brilliant, exhausted, desperate child who had been carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. "Tell me," he said softly. "Tell me what Marcus could not find in his reports. Tell me what the paperwork does not show." And she did. She told him things no document could capture. The night she found her mother unconscious on the bathroom floor. The day the electricity got shut off and her mother shivered under every blanket they owned for 3 days. The moment she realized the scholarship letter in her hand meant nothing if her mother was not alive to see her graduate. "What was I supposed to do?" she asked, her voice raw. "Sit in a classroom learning about history while my mother was dying. Write papers about government policy while she cried herself to sleep from pain." She wiped her face with the back of her bandaged hand. That scholarship was supposed to be my future. But what is a future if my mom is not in it? What is Stanford worth if I lose the only person who has ever loved me? Keanu listened in silence. His hands were still on the steering wheel. The diner? He said. How long? 6 weeks. $12 an hour. 6 nights a week. I was almost there, Mr. Reeves. Just one more week. And during the day, I clean your house so you would not notice Mom was sick. Then I go home and take care of her. Then I go to the diner. Then I start again. When do you sleep? She laughed. It was a hollow, broken sound. Sleep is for people who can afford it. Keanu put the truck in gear and pulled out onto the empty street. The rain was falling harder now, streaking down the windshield in silver lines. I am taking you home, he said. To your mother. Ember's head snapped up. Fear flashed in her eyes. Please do not tell her about the diner. She does not know. If she finds out, it will destroy her. Keanu was quiet for a moment. Ember, he said finally, I am not going to tell your mother about the diner. But I am going to tell you something. He glanced at her, his eyes kind but serious. What you have done comes from love. I understand that. But love that destroys you is not sustainable. Pride that keeps you from asking for help is not strength. It is just another kind of prison. Ember stared at him, her face still wet. I did not have a choice. You did have a choice, Keanu said gently. You just could not see it. Because no one taught you that accepting kindness is not the same as accepting defeat. He pulled the truck up in front of her apartment building. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. The building looked even more tired in the dim streetlight. I am not here to punish you or fire your mother, Keanu said, turning to face her. I am here because I saw a girl washing dishes at 3 in the morning with an honor cord on her backpack, and I knew something was wrong. Ember's lip quivered. Why? Why would you help us? You do not even know us. Keanu was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. I know more than you think, and before this night is over, you will understand why. He opened his door and stepped out into the rain. Come on, he said. Your mother is waiting, and I did not come here to judge you or punish you. I came here to stop you both from destroying yourselves with your own pride. The walk up the 3 flights of stairs felt different this time. Ember walked ahead, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion and shame. Keanu followed behind, a steady presence in the dim hallway. When they reached apartment 3B, Ember fumbled with her key, her bandaged hand making it difficult. She finally got the door open. The apartment was dark, lit only by the weak glow of the small electric heater. Rosalind was sitting on the sofa, wrapped in a thin blanket, her face a mask of pure terror. She had clearly been waiting by the door, imagining every possible terrible outcome. When she saw Ember in the dirty diner uniform, she gasped. Ember. Oh, baby, what happened? Are you hurt? Then she saw Keanu standing in the doorway behind her daughter. Her face went from fear to a deep, profound shame. She tried to stand, to be the capable housekeeper she had always been, but her legs were too weak. She sank back down onto the worn cushions. Mr. Reeves, she breathed. I do not know what to say. She has been working a night shift at a diner, Keanu said gently, stepping into the small room. To pay for your medicine. The medicine you did not tell me you needed. The truth hung in the cold air between them. Stark and painful, Rosalind turned to Ember. Her eyes were wide with a mixture of love and heartbreak. You told him, she asked her daughter. About the diner? He was there, Mom. Ember's voice cracked. At the diner, I dropped a tray. I broke everything. The manager screamed at me in front of everyone. And Mr. Reeves, he saw it all. She rushed to the sofa and collapsed beside her mother, burying her head in Rosalind's lap. I am so sorry, Mom. I am so sorry. I tried so hard. I was so close. Just one more week and I would have had enough. I failed. I failed you. Rosalind wrapped her arms around her daughter, her swollen hands stroking Ember's hair with painful tenderness. She gazed up at Keanu, who stood over them like a silent witness to their grief. "Please," Rosalind begged, her voice barely a sound. "Please do not punish her. It is my fault. All of it. I got sick. I could not work. I could not provide for my own daughter. I am so sorry. I will pay for whatever she broke. I will work for free. I will do anything. Just please do not hurt my daughter." Keanu observed the two women clinging to each other in a sea of debt and sickness and fear. He felt a sharp ache in his chest. It was not pity. It was something older, something deeper. It was the memory of his own mother after the telegram came. The memory of a house that had everything money could buy and nothing that mattered. "Hurt her," he said softly. "Rosalind, I am not here to hurt her. I am here to stop you both from hurting yourselves." Rosalind raised her head, confusion clouding her face. "I do not understand." Keanu walked over to the single worn armchair and sat down slowly. He was no longer the famous actor. He was just a man in a cold room, carrying a story he had not told in many years. "There is something I need to tell you," he said. "Something that will explain why I am here. Why I cannot simply walk away from this." He paused, gathering the words that had been locked inside him for so long. "I had an older brother," Keanu began. His voice was quiet, distant, as if he were speaking from somewhere far away. "His name was Daniel. Danny, we called him. He was everything I wanted to be when I was young. He was brave and kind and funny. He could make anyone laugh, even our mother when she was in one of her moods. I adored him." Ember lifted her head from her mother's lap. Both women were watching him now, their own pain momentarily forgotten. "Daniel enlisted when he was 19 years old. Our mother begged him not to go. She said she had a bad feeling. But Daniel believed in something bigger than himself. He believed in service, in duty, in protecting people who could not protect themselves." Canu's hands rested on his knees. His voice grew heavier. "He was assigned to the 101st Airborne Division. Baker Company. He wrote us letters every week. He told us about the men in his unit, about the places he saw, about the things he was learning. He always ended each letter the same way. 'Do not worry about me. I am exactly where I am supposed to be.'" He stopped. The silence in the room was absolute. "Daniel did not come home," Keanu said finally. "He was 22 years old. A boy, really. Still so young. Still with so much life ahead of him." Rosalind's hand went to her throat. Ember sat frozen, her eyes fixed on Keanu's face. "It destroyed my mother," Keanu continued. "She stopped eating. She stopped sleeping. She would sit by the window for hours, staring at nothing, waiting for someone who would never walk through the door again. I thought I was going to lose her too." He met their eyes. "And then the letters came." "Letters?" Ember asked softly. Keanu nodded. 3 letters. Handwritten. They arrived over the course of several months. They were from Daniel's sergeant, a man who had served with him, who had led him into battle, who had been with him at the end. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his worn leather wallet. From a hidden fold, he took out a small, yellowed piece of paper. It was old and fragile, creased from being folded and unfolded hundreds of times over the years. "This is one of them," Keanu said. "I have carried it with me for decades." He did not read it aloud. Some words were too sacred to speak, but he held it carefully, as if it were made of glass. "The sergeant wrote to my mother about Daniel. He told her that my brother was brave. He told her that Daniel had saved 2 other men in his unit, that he had risked his own life to pull them to safety. He told her that, in his final moments, Daniel was not alone, that he held his hand, that he told him he was proud to have served beside him." Keanu's voice grew thick. "Those letters saved my mother's life. They gave her something to hold onto when everything else had been taken away. They gave her peace. They gave our family a way to grieve without drowning in it." He focused directly on Rosalind. The sergeant's name was Walter Calloway. The color drained from Rosalind's face. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "My father?" she finally managed to say. "That was my father?" "Yes." Keanu said. Your father wrote those letters to a woman he had never met, about a boy she had lost. He did not have to do that. He had his own grief, his own burdens, his own men to mourn. But he took the time to write 3 letters, each one a gift of kindness that I can never repay. Ember was staring at him with wide eyes. You knew my grandfather? I never met him, Keanu said. I never had that honor. But I have known him through those letters for my entire adult life. He taught me something I have never forgotten. He taught me that the smallest act of kindness can change someone's life. That taking a moment to care for a stranger in pain is never wasted. He leaned forward in his chair. Your grandfather left no one behind, Rosalind. Not his men in battle. Not the families of those who fell. He carried them all with him, even when the weight must have been unbearable. He turned to Ember. And now, I find his granddaughter washing dishes at 3 in the morning, sacrificing everything she has worked for, destroying her own future to save her mother. I find his daughter too proud to ask for help, even when she is disappearing before her own child's eyes. His voice was gentle but firm. This is not charity, Rosalind. This is not pity. This is a debt that has been waiting to be paid for decades. Your father saved my family. Now it is my turn to save his. The room was silent. Rosalind sat in quiet grief, her swollen hands covering her face. Ember was beside her, her own cheeks glistening, unable to speak. I do not deserve this, Rosalind whispered. We do not deserve this. That is not for you to decide, Keanu said. Your father did not ask my mother if she deserved his kindness. He simply gave it. And I am going to do the same. He stood up from the chair. This is what is going to happen, he said. His voice was calm but left no room for argument. Tomorrow morning at 9, a car will be here. It will take you, Rosalind, to Cedars Sinai Medical Center. I have spoken with a doctor there, a specialist named Dr. Harrison. He is one of the best in the country for your condition. He is expecting you. Rosalind raised her head, her eyes red and swollen. I cannot. The cost. I cannot possibly. You will not be discussing costs, Keanu said. You will be discussing your health. All of it. The transportation, the treatment, the medication. It is handled. It is paid for. That is final. He turned to Ember. And you. My assistant Marcus will be at Ridgemont High School at 8:30 tomorrow morning. He will meet with your principal, Mrs. Pemberton. He will explain the family emergency that caused your absence. He will provide documentation of your mother's illness. Your truancy record will be corrected. You will take your final exams. You will graduate. Ember shook her head slowly. But the scholarship. I missed the deadline. Stanford already. Deadlines, Keanu said, and a rare thin smile touched his lips, are often just suggestions for people who know how to ask the right questions. Marcus is very good at asking the right questions. He will be speaking with the admissions office at Stanford tomorrow. You will accept your scholarship. You will go to California in the fall. He paused. That is not a request, Ember. That is what is going to happen. The room fell silent again. Mother and daughter sat together on the worn sofa, staring at him as if he had just performed a miracle. In 2 minutes, he had solved problems that had been crushing them for months. Rosalind was the first to speak. Her voice was fragile, barely holding together. Mr. Reeves, why? Even with everything you have told us about my father, this is too much. We cannot accept this. Keanu studied her for a long moment. Then he walked over and crouched down in front of the sofa, bringing himself to eye level with both of them. Rosalind, he said gently, you have spent your whole life teaching your daughter about sacrifice, about working hard, about never giving up. Those are good lessons, important lessons. He glanced at Ember. But there is another lesson you forgot to teach her. You forgot to teach her that it is okay to accept help. That accepting kindness from others is not weakness. That sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is admit they cannot carry the weight alone. He addressed Rosalind again. Pride is important. Self-respect matters. but pride that makes you watch your daughter destroy herself rather than ask for help. That is not strength. That is fear wearing a mask. Rosalind's lip trembled. I was afraid, she admitted. I was afraid that if I asked for help, people would think less of me, that they would see me as weak, as a burden. I know, Keanu said softly. I understand that fear. But look at what it has cost you. Look at what it has cost your daughter. He shifted his attention to Ember. And you. You are brilliant. You are brave. You love your mother more than you love yourself. But love that destroys you is not sustainable. If you burn yourself to ashes to keep someone else warm, eventually there will be nothing left of you to give. Ember wiped her face with the back of her bandaged hand. I did not know what else to do, she said quietly. I could not just sit in school and pretend everything was fine while my mom was suffering. I know, Keanu said. And I am not telling you that your choice was wrong. I am telling you that you should never have had to make it alone. No one should have to choose between their future and their family. No child should have to carry that weight. He stood up slowly. Your grandfather understood something that took me many years to learn. He understood that we are not meant to survive alone. That asking for help is not a sign of failure. That the strongest people are often the ones who know when to reach out. He regarded both of them. He left no one behind. Not in battle. Not in life. And I am not going to leave you behind either. Rosalind reached out and took his hand. Her grip was weak, her fingers swollen and painful, but she held on as if he were the only solid thing in a world that had been falling apart. Thank you, she breathed. Thank you. Keanu squeezed her hand gently. Do not thank me. Thank your father. This is his legacy. I am just the one delivering it. He released her hand and walked toward the door. At the threshold, he paused and glanced back at them. Mother and daughter were holding each other on the worn sofa, crying together, but these were different now. These were sounds of relief, of hope, of something that might have been joy. A car will be here at 9, he said. Please be ready. And Ember, 8:30 at the school. Do not be late. He opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. Mr. Reeves. Ember called out. He turned. She was standing now, her thin frame silhouetted against the weak light of the apartment. Her face was still damp, but there was something different in her eyes, something that had not been there before. My grandfather, she said. He died when I was 12. I remember him, but not well. Just bits and pieces. The way he laughed. The way he called me his little soldier. Her voice wavered. I always wondered what kind of man he really was. Now I know. Thank you for telling me. Keanu nodded slowly. He was the kind of man who wrote letters to strangers in pain. The kind of man who carried others when they could not carry themselves. The kind of man who believed that no one should ever be left behind. He paused. You have his eyes, Ember, and I think you have his heart too. Do not let it break trying to save everyone by yourself. That was never what he would have wanted. He stepped out into the hallway and pulled the door closed behind him. Outside, the night air was cold and clean. Keanu walked slowly down the 3 flights of stairs, his footsteps echoing in the empty stairwell. When he reached the street, he stopped and gazed up at the sky. The clouds had cleared, and a handful of stars were visible through the city lights. He thought about Daniel, about the letters, about all the years he had carried that debt, waiting for a way to repay it. This story was real. This was the one that mattered. Daniel, he said quietly to the night sky, I hope I made you proud. I hope this is what you would have done. The stars did not answer, but somewhere in the silence, Keanu felt something he had not felt in a very long time. A sense of peace. A sense of purpose. A sense that maybe, after all these years, he was finally exactly where he was supposed to be. He walked to his truck and sat for a moment in the darkness. Tomorrow would be a long day. There were phone calls to make, arrangements to finalize, lives to rebuild. But tonight, for the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt something like hope. He started the engine and pulled away from the curb, leaving the tired apartment building behind. But he knew he would be back. This was not an ending. It was a beginning. The next 2 weeks passed like a dream after a long nightmare. At 9 o'clock the morning after that fateful night, a black sedan arrived at the tired apartment building on the east side of the city. Rosalind Calloway, dressed in her best clothes despite her swollen hands, climbed carefully into the back seat. She was trembling, not from her illness, but from something she had almost forgotten how to feel. Hope. The drive to Sinai Medical Center took 40 minutes. When they arrived, nurses were waiting at the entrance with a wheelchair. They knew her name. They smiled at her as if she were an old friend, not a charity case. A kind woman in blue scrubs wheeled her through the pristine hallways to a private room with a window overlooking a garden. Dr. Harrison came to see her within the hour. He was a tall man with warm eyes and gray hair at his temples, the kind of doctor who made patients feel safe just by walking into the room. "Mrs. Calloway," he said, taking her swollen hand gently in both of his. "I have reviewed your case thoroughly. Your condition is serious, but it is not hopeless. We are going to make this better. Your job is to rest and to trust us." For the first time in 3 months, Rosalind Calloway allowed herself to believe that she might actually survive. While her mother was being examined by specialists, Ember was walking through the front doors of Ridgemont High School. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She had not been inside this building in 30 days. 30 days that felt like 30 years. Marcus Chen was waiting for her in the main office. He stood when she entered, his expression calm and reassuring. "Miss Calloway," he said, "Mrs. Pemberton is expecting us." The principal's office was smaller than Ember remembered. Mrs. Pemberton rose from behind her desk the moment Ember appeared in the doorway. She was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and kind eyes that were now red from recent emotion. "Ember," she breathed. "Oh, my dear girl." She crossed the room and wrapped Ember in a hug that nearly broke her. It was the hug of someone who had been worried, sick, who had imagined the worst, who was overwhelmingly relieved to see her student alive and whole. "I am so sorry," Ember whispered into the principal's shoulder. "I am so sorry I disappeared. I did not know what else to do." "Hush," Mrs. Pemberton said softly. "You are here now. That is what matters." Marcus stepped forward and placed a folder on the principal's desk. "This contains documentation of Mrs. Calloway's medical condition," he explained. "It establishes that Ember has been acting as her mother's primary caregiver during a family medical emergency. We are requesting that her truancy record be reviewed and that she be allowed to complete her final examinations." Mrs. Pemberton wiped her eyes and nodded firmly. "Consider it done. Ember, you will have 2 weeks to prepare. We will arrange for you to take your exams in a private setting. Your teachers have already agreed to provide additional support." She paused and studied Ember's face. "You are still our valedictorian, Ember. That has not changed. The graduation ceremony is in 3 weeks. I expect to see you on that stage, delivering your speech." Ember's eyes filled with something that might have been disbelief. "The scholarship," she managed to say. "Stanford. I missed the deadline. I thought it was gone." Mrs. Pemberton smiled. "Mr. Reeves wrote a letter to the admissions office. By hand. 3 pages. He explained your situation. He did not ask for special treatment. He simply told them the truth about who you are and what you have been through." She reached across her desk and picked up an envelope. "This arrived yesterday. It is addressed to you." Ember took the envelope with shaking hands. The return address read Stanford University, Office of Admissions. She opened it slowly, her fingers barely functioning. The letter inside was brief, but the words would stay with her for the rest of her life. "Dear Miss Calloway," it began. "After careful review of your circumstances, we are pleased to inform you that your scholarship offer has been extended. We look forward to welcoming you to Stanford University this fall." Your resilience, your dedication, and your character are exactly the qualities we seek in our students. We are honored that you have chosen to join our community. Ember read the letter 3 times. Then she sat down heavily in a chair and wept. The 2 weeks that followed were the hardest and the most rewarding of Ember's life. She studied 18 hours a day, fueled by coffee and determination. She visited her mother at the hospital every evening, watching as the color slowly returned to Rosalind's cheeks, as the swelling in her hands began to decrease, as the light came back into her eyes. She took her exams one by one, in a quiet room with Mrs. Pemberton supervising. She poured everything she had into those tests, every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt and despair transformed into focus and determination. When the results came back, she had passed every subject with honors. Her GPA remained a perfect 4.0. But there was one more thing she needed to do before she could truly move forward. On a Tuesday afternoon, 1 week before graduation, Ember walked into the Blue Moon Diner for the last time. The smell hit her immediately. Stale coffee. Grace, the ghost of 100 exhausting nights. She stood in the doorway for a moment, letting the memories wash over her. The heavy trays, the aching feet, the cruel words, the stolen tips. Gary Thornton was behind the counter, barking orders at a new waitress who looked just as tired and beaten down as Ember had once been. When he saw Ember standing in the doorway, his face went through a rapid transformation, surprise, then recognition, then a greasy, desperate smile. "Miss Calloway," he said, hurrying around the counter. His voice was sweet now, dripping with false friendliness. "What a pleasant surprise. I heard about your situation. Such a terrible misunderstanding that night. I hope there are no hard feelings." He glanced nervously toward the door, as if expecting Keanu Reeves to walk in behind her. "I came for my final paycheck," Ember said calmly. Her voice was steady. She was not the same girl who had dropped a tray of dishes and wept on the floor. She was someone new now. Someone stronger. "Of course. Of course," Gary said quickly. He practically ran to the register and pulled out an envelope. "It is all here. Every penny. And I added a little extra. A bonus. For your hard work." Ember took the envelope and looked inside. The amount was nearly double what she was owed. Blood money. Guilt money. The price of silence. She looked up at Gary. His smile was frozen on his face, but his eyes were nervous. "Mr. Thornton," she said quietly, "you do not need to apologize to me. You do not need to give me extra money to keep me quiet." His smile faltered. "What you need to do," Ember continued, "is change the way you treat your employees. All of them. Not just the ones who might know famous people. The scared teenagers who need money for their families. The single mothers working double shifts. The people who cannot afford to stand up for themselves." She placed the envelope back on the counter. "Keep the bonus. I only want what I earned. Nothing more." Gary stared at her, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. "And one more thing," Ember said. "I have filed a complaint with the State Labor Board. You have been scheduling minors for overnight shifts that violate federal labor laws. You have been withholding tips that belong to your employees. Other workers have agreed to provide statements." The color drained from Gary's face. "You cannot?" he stammered. "I will be ruined. Please, I have a family." Ember regarded him for a long moment. She thought about all the nights she had cried in the storage room, all the tips he had stolen, all the cruel words he had hurled at her and at the others. "I am not doing this for revenge, Mr. Thornton," she said quietly. "I am doing this because it is right, because the next girl who works here deserves to be treated with dignity, because you will never change unless someone holds you accountable." She picked up her rightful paycheck and turned toward the door. "I hope you learn from this," she said over her shoulder. "I hope you become the kind of person your family can be proud of. But that is your choice to make, not mine." She walked out into the afternoon sunlight and never looked back. 3 weeks later, the investigation concluded. The Blue Moon Diner was found guilty of multiple labor violations. Gary Thornton was terminated. The restaurant was required to pay restitution to every employee whose tips had been stolen. Several workers who had been afraid to speak up finally found the courage to add their voices to the complaint. Ember had not needed Keanu to fight her battles. She had stood up for herself and for others. That, she realized, was the true lesson her grandfather had taught without ever knowing it. The strongest people are not the ones who never fall. They are the ones who get back up and help others do the same. Graduation day arrived on a Saturday morning in late May. The sun was bright and warm, the sky a perfect, cloudless blue. The football field at Ridgemont High School was filled with rows of white folding chairs, each one occupied by a proud parent or grandparent or friend. Ember sat on the stage in her blue cap and gown. The blue and gold honor cord was draped around her neck, the same cord that had hung from her backpack on the night everything changed. She gazed out at the crowd, searching for familiar faces. She found them in the third row. Her mother was there, sitting in a wheelchair but looking healthier than she had in months. The swelling in her hands had gone down significantly. Her hair was done. She was wearing the blue dress Ember had bought her with her first legitimate paycheck. And she was smiling, her eyes shining with a pride so fierce that Ember could feel it from the stage. Next to her, in a simple gray jacket and jeans, sat Keanu Reeves. He did not look like a celebrity. He looked like a family friend, like an uncle, like someone who belonged there. He caught Ember's eye across the crowded field. He did not wave or make a scene. He simply nodded, a small gesture of respect, a silent acknowledgement of everything they had been through together. When Ember's name was called, valedictorian Ember Calloway, the applause was thunderous. She rose from her seat and walked to the podium, her legs steady, her heart full. She had written a speech. She had practiced it a dozen times. But as she stood before the microphone and looked out at the sea of faces, she realized that the words she had prepared were not the words she needed to say. She folded the paper and set it aside. "Good morning," she said. Her voice was clear and strong, carrying across the silent field. "I wrote a speech about the future, about success and achievement and the importance of education. But standing here today, I realize that is not what I want to talk about." She gripped the sides of the podium. "I want to talk about what happens when the future seems impossible, when you cannot see a path forward, when you are so tired and so scared that giving up seems like the only option." The crowd was silent. Every eye was fixed on her. 3 months ago, I almost gave up. I was working 2 jobs, sleeping 3 hours a night, watching my mother disappear before my eyes. I threw away my scholarship letter because I thought that was what love meant. I thought sacrifice meant destroying yourself to save someone else. She paused. I was wrong. Her eyes found her mother in the crowd. Rosalind was crying silently, her hand pressed to her heart. Real love is not just sacrifice. Real love is also accepting help when you need it. It is admitting that you cannot carry the weight alone. It is having the courage to reach out and trust that someone will reach back. She shifted her gaze to Keanu. He was watching her with quiet intensity. "I am standing here today because a stranger saw me at my lowest moment and chose to help. He did not have to. He owed me nothing. But he stopped. He paid attention. He asked questions. And he refused to let me destroy myself." Her voice grew stronger. "We are taught that history is made by important people, by presidents and billionaires and generals. But I have learned something different. History is made by ordinary people who choose to do the right thing. By a sergeant who writes letters to a grieving mother he has never met. By a man who stops in a diner at midnight and stands up for a girl he barely knows. By teachers who refuse to give up on their students. By friends who listen when you need to talk." She looked out at her classmates. "We are about to go out into the world. Some of us will become doctors or lawyers or engineers. Some of us will struggle to find our path. But no matter where we end up, we will all have the same choice to make every single day. She leaned into the microphone. We can walk past the people who are struggling. We can pretend we do not see them. We can tell ourselves that their problems are not our concern. She shook her head. Or we can stop. We can pay attention. We can ask if they are okay. We can offer a hand, even when it is inconvenient, even when we are tired, even when we have our own problems to deal with. Her voice dropped to something softer, more personal. That is how you change the world. Not with grand gestures or viral moments or millions of dollars. You change the world one person at a time. One act of kindness at a time. One moment of seeing someone who feels invisible and letting them know they matter. She straightened her shoulders. My grandfather was a soldier. He served his country with honor. But the thing I am most proud of is not his medals or his rank. It is the letters he wrote. 3 letters to a woman he never met about a young man she had lost. Those letters saved a family. Those letters are the reason I am standing here today. She smiled. Be the person who writes the letter. Be the person who stops in the diner. Be the person who refuses to leave anyone behind. She took a breath. Congratulations to the class of this year. We made it. But this is not the end. This is just the beginning. Go out there and be kind. That is how we change the world. She stepped back from the podium. For a moment, there was silence. Then the applause began. It was not polite. It was not perfunctory. It was a roar. Students rose from their seats. Parents stood and clapped until their hands hurt. Mrs. Pemberton was openly weeping. Teachers were hugging each other. In the third row, Rosalind Calloway was sobbing with joy, her swollen hands pressed together in gratitude. And beside her, Keanu Reeves was applauding quietly, a rare, genuine smile on his face. The summer passed quickly after that. Rosalind continued her treatment and grew stronger every week. The new medication was working. The pain was manageable. For the first time in years, she could walk without her walker, could use her hands without wincing, could sleep through the night without crying. Keanu came to visit often. He never made a big deal about it. He would just show up in his old pickup truck with groceries or books, or sometimes just a willingness to sit and talk. He and Rosalind would drink coffee in the small kitchen while Ember studied for her placement exams. One afternoon in late July, Keanu arrived with a different purpose. Rosalind, he said, settling into the worn armchair that had become his unofficial seat. I have something to discuss with you. Rosalind set down her coffee cup, her expression curious. My mother left behind a small charitable fund when she passed away. Keanu explained. She called it the Baker Company Fund. Her idea was to provide grants for the children and grandchildren of veterans. Help with education costs, medical bills, emergency expenses. Small acts of kindness for families who have already given so much. He paused. After she died, I let it go dormant. I was busy. I was distracted. I forgot. But recently, I reactivated it. I have funded it properly this time. But it needs someone to run it. Someone who understands what it means to struggle. Someone who knows how to read applications and see the real people behind them. Rosalind's eyes widened. Mr. Reeves, I could not possibly. You are a veteran's daughter, Keanu said gently. You know what sacrifice means. You know what it feels like to need help and be too proud to ask. I cannot think of anyone more qualified. Rosalind was silent for a long moment. She looked down at her hands, which were healing, which could work again, which had been given back to her by a stranger's kindness. Yes, she said finally. Her voice was steady. Yes, I would be honored. The day Ember left for Stanford was a morning in late August. The air was already warm, the summer holding on for one last breath before autumn began its slow approach. A taxi waited at the curb outside the apartment building. Ember's bags were already loaded in the trunk. Everything she owned fit into 2 suitcases and a backpack. But she was richer than she had ever been. She stood on the sidewalk, her mother and Keanu beside her. Rosalind was standing on her own 2 feet, no walker, no wheelchair. She was still thin, still fragile, but there was strength in her now. Strength and hope and a future she had almost lost. "Call me every night," Rosalind said, her voice thick with emotion. "I do not care what time it is. I do not care if you think I am sleeping. Call me." "I will, Mom," Ember said. "I promise." She hugged her mother tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, memorizing the feeling of her arms. "I am so proud of you," Rosalind whispered. "Your grandfather would be so proud of you." When they finally let go, Ember turned to Keanu. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, flat package wrapped in brown paper. "This is for you," he said. "For your dorm room, to remind you where you came from and where you are going." Ember unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a simple dark wood frame, and behind the glass was the photograph. The same photograph Keanu had carried for decades. A group of young men in military fatigues, smiling in a dusty foreign landscape. Two of them stood in the center, their arms around each other's shoulders. One was tall and grinning, full of life. The other was strong and steady, with kind eyes. Daniel and Sergeant Walter Calloway, brothers in arms, brothers in spirit. "This was Daniel's," Keanu said quietly. "He carried it with him. It was in his pocket when they sent his things home. I have kept it in a box for many years, not sure what to do with it." He met Ember's eyes. "Your grandfather saved my family with 3 letters written from his heart. Now his granddaughter is going to Stanford to study government and history and make a difference in the world. This photograph belongs with you now. It belongs to the future, not the past." Ember held the frame against her chest, unable to speak. Tears were rolling down her cheeks, but she did not try to hide them. "Thank you," she finally managed to say. "For everything. For seeing me when I was invisible. For stopping when everyone else walked by." Keanu smiled. It was a simple smile, warm and genuine. "That is what your grandfather taught me," he said. "That is what Daniel would have wanted. We do not leave anyone behind." Ember hugged him. It was not a formal hug, not the embrace of a famous person and a stranger. It was the hug of family, of 2 people connected by sacrifice and kindness and a debt that had finally been paid. She climbed into the taxi and settled into the back seat. As the car pulled away from the curb, she turned and looked out the rear window. Her mother was standing on the sidewalk, one hand raised in farewell. Beside her stood Keanu Reeves, his arm around her shoulders like a protective older brother. 2 people from completely different worlds, united by tragedy and kindness, and the simple choice to help when it would have been easier to look away. Ember watched them until the taxi turned the corner, and they disappeared from view. Keanu stood on the sidewalk until the taxi was gone. The morning sun was warm on his face. The city was waking up around him, cars honking, people hurrying to work, the endless rhythm of ordinary life. He thought about the night everything began. The sleepless hours before his brother's death anniversary, the sound of dishes being washed at 3 in the morning, a girl with an honor cord on her backpack and desperation in her eyes. He had almost missed it. He had almost gone back to bed. He had almost let the moment pass. But he had not. He had stopped. He had paid attention. He had asked questions. And that simple choice had changed everything. He turned to Rosalind. "Come on," he said. "We have work to do. The fund is not going to run itself." Rosalind smiled. It was the smile of someone who had been given back her life, her daughter, her purpose. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything. I do not know how I will ever repay you." Keanu shook his head. This was never about repayment. This was about something your father understood better than anyone. We are not meant to carry our burdens alone. We are meant to help each other. That is how we honor the people we have lost. Not by grieving forever, but by living the way they would have wanted us to live. He looked up at the bright blue sky. "The debt was never about the past," he said softly. "It was always about the future. Your father saved my family so that one day, decades later, I could save his." That is how kindness works. It echoes forward through time, touching lives we will never see, changing futures we will never know. He smiled. Ember is going to do great things, and she is going to help others the way we helped her. And those people will help others. And on forever. He turned back to Rosalind. That is your father's real legacy. Not medals or rank or military honors. It is the kindness he planted in the world, still growing, still spreading, still changing lives. They walked together toward his old pickup truck, two ordinary people on an ordinary street, carrying an extraordinary gift that would ripple forward through generations. And that night, for the first time in many years, Keanu Reeves slept peacefully. No restless pacing, no haunted memories, no weight of unpaid debts, just peace, just gratitude, just the quiet knowledge that he had done exactly what his brother would have wanted. And somewhere far away, in a dormitory room at Stanford University, a young woman hung a photograph on her wall. Two soldiers, arms around each other, smiling at the camera across decades of time. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she sat down at her desk, opened her notebook, and began to write. The first line read, "This is a story about kindness, and that is where we will end our story. A debt spanning decades finally paid. A future that was almost lost, now reborn. A reminder that the smallest act of compassion can echo forward through time, changing lives we will never see." If this story touched your heart, if it made you think about the people in your life who might be struggling in silence, then it has done its job. Be the person who stops. Be the person who asks. Be the person who refuses to leave anyone behind. That is how we change the world. One act of kindness at a time.